My name is Sadie, and the reality I knew completely fell apart when I was 21. I came home after my freshman year of college, dreaming of warm family hugs and the comfort of our familiar dinner table. But instead, a nightmare awaited me, a bright, sold sign on the lawn of my childhood home, and my entire life unceremoniously dumped in boxes by the driveway. When I frantically dialed my mother's number, all I heard was her icy, detached voice saying, "You're on your own now." That very day, I cut them out of my life for good. Over the next year and a half, marked by 260 panicked phone calls during my darkest moments, I was forced to learn what family truly means, and what it doesn't. Write in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you want to follow my journey from rock bottom to getting back on my feet, hit that subscribe button. On the surface, our family's existence in the quiet town of Maple Creek was the picture of normalcy. We never wanted for anything, thanks to my parents, Arthur and Eleanor Vance, who created a comfortable life for us. My father's career as an investment advisor at a local firm, combined with my mother's position managing a busy real estate agency, funded our perfect world. To the outside world, we were the quintessential American family, a house with a manicured lawn, daily family dinners, and a collection of vacation photos in matching silver frames on the mantelpiece. However, behind this polished facade, our home life was governed by the crushing weight of relentless expectations. From my earliest days in school, getting top grades wasn't a cause for celebration, it was simply what was required of me. My parents only appeared at my school concerts on the rare occasions I had a solo performance. Winning a silver medal at the state science fair didn't bring congratulations, but rather a stern talk about how I could have won gold. There was no time to rest on laurels. Each success just raised the bar for the next challenge they set for me. The warmth of a hug or an encouraging touch became a distant memory from my early childhood. By the time I was in high school, the highest praise I could hope for was a short, approving nod from across the dinner table. Our family discussions never touched on my personal hopes or fears. They were strategic meetings focused solely on my grades and college application strategy. What started as a small emotional gap grew over the years into a vast canyon of silence that I had no idea how to bridge. Nevertheless, I channeled this lack of connection into a flawless academic performance. I maintained a perfect GPA, led the school debate team to the state finals, and served as the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. Each of these achievements was a carefully chosen piece of the puzzle, designed to assemble the perfect application for a top-tier university. The moment I opened my acceptance letter offering a full scholarship to the architecture program at Crestwood University is the last memory I have of seeing genuine, unadulterated pride in my parents' eyes. For me, the choice to study architecture was anything but random. Since I was 9, I had filled countless sketchbooks with drawings of buildings, creating worlds on paper where people could feel safe, seen, and connected. My main ambition was to design community centers in underserved neighborhoods, creating spaces that could truly change lives and give people a place where they truly belong. It was this cherished dream that served as my shield against the emotional void in my own home. My room was the only place in the house where I felt safe, my personal sanctuary. Its walls were covered with maps of fictional cities, and the shelves were crammed with stacks of worn-out novels next to design textbooks. In the most prominent spot were items from my grandfather Thomas, whom I lost when I was 12, his old compass, a battered leather journal, and a box with his collection of river stones. Grandpa Thomas was my main source of emotional warmth. I remember sitting in his garage as he taught me how to carve wooden figures. "Your real worth isn't in your grades, Sadie," he told me then. "It's in the kind of person you are." After he passed away, that battered journal, full of his thoughts, became my most treasured relic. The summer before I left for college, I spent working 2 jobs at a local cafe to save money for school supplies. My parents called it a lesson in self-reliance, making it clear that my scholarship only covered tuition, and everything else was my responsibility. I was both scared and eagerly looking forward to the moment I would leave their house. My freshman year at Crestwood University was a breath of fresh air. My roommate, Chloe, a cheerful exchange student from France, became a true friend. Through her, I met Jordan, a witty guy from the music department who lived in our dorm. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued me as a person, not for my achievements. It was a real, unconditional friendship. That first year changed everything. My life was suddenly filled with events. I joined the university's architecture club, started volunteering, and even went on a date. My professors praised my designs, seeing not just technical skill but real passion. One of them, Dr. Evelyn Reed, saw the potential in my community-focused projects and effectively became my mentor. My communication with my parents was reduced to short, formulaic calls once a week. The questions were always the same, revolving around my academic performance and career prospects. I gave them the answers they wanted to hear but never shared anything about my new friends or the real me. I instinctively knew that they simply wouldn't appreciate this part of my new life. As the holidays approached, an inexplicable anxiety grew within me. Despite all our estrangement, I still considered their house my home and was sure I would spend the summer there. When I brought up the subject in our last phone call, my mother answered somewhat distractedly, "We'll talk when you get here." I realized now that there was an ominous sign in her vague response, but at that moment, all my thoughts were consumed by my upcoming exams. The end of the semester was a real triumph. I not only made the dean's list but also received a departmental award for my community center project. The evening before everyone was due to leave for the summer, Chloe and Jordan threw a small party in our room to celebrate. We spent the time sharing memories, exchanging contact information for the break, and promising to stay in touch. "Are you sure everything will be okay at home?" Chloe asked as I packed my things. "You never talk about your family with much warmth." I just waved it off, packing my clothes. "It's only for 3 months. I plan to find a part-time job and work on my portfolio. Besides, my room is there, my little world." Before he left, Jordan gave me a tight hug. "Promise you'll call if anything goes wrong." "We're serious." I nodded, not suspecting how prophetic their words would be. Locking the door to my dorm room that final morning, I felt a strange mix of pride for the year that had passed and a deep fear of returning home. Although the school year had changed me for the better, the trip back felt like a step backward. At least, I thought, my sanctuary awaited me, the room with my maps and books. How wrong I was. 6 hours on the bus flew by in a blur of changing landscapes. The bustling university town slowly gave way to the quiet, familiar suburbs of my youth. Despite my growing anxiety, I found comfort in the simple thought of sleeping in my own bed again. I sent my parents a short text, "Bus arrives at 7 o'clock. See you soon." When there was no reply, I just told myself they were probably busy at work. At my stop, I pulled my luggage off the bus, a single large suitcase, a laptop bag, and a portfolio with my best work from the semester. All my other belongings, from books to childhood souvenirs, were supposed to be waiting for me in my bedroom. As soon as I stepped out of the air-conditioned bus, the thick June heat hit me like a wall. I felt sweat bead on my forehead as I began the familiar 20-minute walk to my street. When I turned onto my street, something felt wrong. Our 2-story house looked strangely unfamiliar from a distance. As I got closer, I slowed my pace, and confusion turned to alarm. A large red and white, "Sold" sign was hammered into the lawn, and the logo on it belonged not to my mother's company, but to their main competitor. My heart pounded as I reached the driveway. There, piled up by the garage, were stacks of cardboard boxes. They were carelessly taped up, and some were already soggy from a recent downpour. With a trembling hand, I opened the nearest one. Inside, my precious books were thrown together, their pages bent and covers torn. "Those boxes have been sitting here for 4 days, a voice called from the neighboring yard. Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, was watching me from her porch with an expression of sincere sympathy. "I called your parents when I saw them carrying your things out. They assured me you knew all about it. Dear, did they not tell you anything? I couldn't say a word as I frantically pulled out my phone. I dialed my mother's number. After 5 long rings, she finally answered. Yes, Sadie. Her voice was ice cold, the same tone she reserved for her most difficult clients at the office. My voice became a choked whisper, breaking with a panic I couldn't control. Mom, what's going on? There's a sold sign on our lawn, and my whole life is packed in boxes by the road. There wasn't a hint of surprise in her voice, just a flat, matter-of-fact tone. Yes, we sold the house. Your father and I moved to Arizona. We discussed this a few months ago. Her words stunned me, my mind simply refused to accept them. I quickly replayed all our bland weekly calls in my head. They had never once mentioned moving, not a single word about Arizona. A wave of cold, genuine disbelief washed over me. What are you talking about? When did this happen? And where am I supposed to go now? The questions tumbled out, fueled by the desperation rising in my throat. You're an adult now, Sadie, she declared, her voice devoid of all emotion. You have a scholarship. It's time you learned to solve your own problems. The clinical detachment in her voice hurt 1,000 times more than if she had yelled at me. The first tears broke through. But all my things are here. My books, my clothes, my grandfather's journal. Where am I supposed to live for the next 3 months? The dorms are closed. I paced frantically on the sidewalk, my rambling monologue, punctuated by sobs, drawing sympathetic glances from passing neighbors. We left what we thought was important, my mother's voice replied, void of any warmth. The rest is there, deal with it. Be glad we didn't just donate it all to charity. This is what being an adult is. Her words held no sympathy, no understanding of their actions. Finally, the numbness faded, replaced by a surge of intense emotion. Being an adult? You abandoned me. You didn't even have the decency to tell me you were moving. My voice rose to a scream, and I no longer cared who on this quiet suburban street could hear me. Figure it out, Sadie, she retorted coldly. You were always so proud of your independence. Here's your chance to prove it. And then the line went dead. The deafening dial tone buzzed in my ear before I could formulate a response. For a moment, I just stood there, the phone feeling heavy and foreign pressed against my ear. It was impossible to process what had just happened. The triumphant end of the school year, all my awards and achievements, it all became meaningless in an instant, replaced by a single, terrifying thought. I was homeless, without warning and without any preparation. I felt a gentle touch and, looking up, saw Mrs. Henderson. Deep concern was etched on her wrinkled face. Sadie, dear, are you all right? The simple kindness in her voice finally broke me. I collapsed onto the edge of the nearest damp box, and the sobs I had been holding back burst out, unstoppable. Choking on tears, I tried to explain the small part of the situation I understood myself. Mrs. Henderson listened patiently, her expression changing from concern to deeply indignant. You'll stay with me tonight, she stated firmly, in a tone that brooked no argument. We'll figure something out tomorrow, but you will not be sleeping on the street. Arthur and Eleanor Vance should be ashamed of themselves. That evening, sitting on the floor of Mrs. Henderson's house, I methodically unpacked and repacked each box, trying to make a list of what was left of my life. The gaps were enormous. My grandfather's journal, the one thing I cherished most, was gone. So were the expensive architecture textbooks I had saved up for over several years. My winter coat was missing, as was most of my footwear. The remaining items seemed to have been chosen at random, as if someone had hastily grabbed things without any thought for what I might actually need. After that, I tried calling my father, clinging to the faint hope that he might offer some explanation, or even an apology. The call went straight to voicemail. I dialed my mother's number again, with the same result. My hands trembled as I typed a message, my fingers struggling to hit the keys. How could you do this to me? Where is Grandpa's journal? Where are my winter clothes and textbooks? An hour later, my phone vibrated with a reply. The message was terrifyingly short and practical. We left you a few sentimental items. The books were donated to the local library. Your winter clothes went to charity. You can buy yourself new things with the money you earned this summer. The ease with which they had disposed of the things most meaningful to me felt like a final, decisive act. It told me everything I needed to know. I typed one final response: don't ever contact me again. Then, with a strange sense of finality, I blocked both their numbers on my phone. That night, I tried to sleep on Mrs. Henderson's fold-out sofa, feeling a deep numbness that was stronger than tears. Around midnight, a thunderstorm broke over the neighborhood. From the living room window, I watched as sheets of rain soaked the cardboard boxes on the driveway, destroying what was left of my childhood. The flimsy cardboard, I thought, was a lot like my parents' affection. It offered no real protection from the storm. Morning came with clear skies but no relief. Mrs. Henderson made coffee and toast, and her gentle kindness was a stark contrast to how my own family had treated me. While we ate, she made a few calls, asking friends for advice. My niece's daughter lived in a student boarding house last summer, she explained. It's not fancy, but it's affordable, and they might have a room available. By noon, I had secured the last available room in a dilapidated Victorian house converted into student housing, just 6 blocks from where I grew up. The rent was so high that it would eat up most of my savings in a few weeks. My new room was little more than a closet, with peeling wallpaper and a mattress that sagged in the middle. My roommate, a pharmacy student named Rachel, immediately laid down her rules. I work night shifts at the hospital and sleep during the day, she stated bluntly. So I need it to be quiet in here. Mrs. Henderson helped me sort through the rain-soaked boxes to salvage what was left. Many of my books were beyond repair, their pages stuck together and covers warped. My design sketches were the hardest hit. Years of my work had turned into a soggy, useless mass of paper. I photographed the few sketches that were still salvageable before throwing the originals away with a heavy heart. With a roof over my head but my savings dwindling fast, I made finding a job my top priority. The summer job market was already crowded, but after several days of searching, I finally managed to piece together an income from 3 part-time jobs: early mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the local library, and babysitting on weekends. My new schedule was grueling. Days blurred together, waking up at 5:30 a.m. for the coffee shop shift, followed by long hours at the library. Every evening, I would collapse into bed, exhausted. Weekends were spent babysitting, leaving no time for rest. Even working nearly 60 hours a week, I was barely making ends meet. Any hope of a summer internship in architecture was now completely out of reach. 2 weeks into this grueling routine, an unexpected call came. It was Laura, my father's sister. Unlike the rest of the family, she had always shown a genuine interest in my life, though we rarely spoke. "Sadie, I just found out about everything," she began, her voice filled with distress. "I'm so sorry. If I had known earlier, you would have been in our guest room long ago." "How do you know?" I asked, feeling only tired, not surprised. "Your mother mentioned it in passing as if it were no big deal," Laura replied, her tone clearly disapproving. "She said you were just overreacting. But I want you to know the truth, this wasn't a spontaneous decision. They had been planning this move for months. Even through my fatigue, the realization that it had all been planned hurt." "Did they say why?" I asked. Laura hesitated for a moment. "They invested the money from the house sale in an investment property in Arizona. It seems they want to get into the real estate business there, and they needed the capital." She added, "Sadie, they made it clear they have no intention of supporting you financially anymore. In their view, college students should be completely independent. The conversation confirmed everything I had feared, but the knowledge didn't make it any easier. Laura offered to help with money, but my pride made me refuse. She insisted on sending a small amount anyway. The money arrived just in time to cover an unexpected doctor's bill when a simple cold developed complications due to severe exhaustion. As June turned into July, my physical and mental strength were at their breaking point. The combination of constant work and lack of sleep left me feeling perpetually drained. Proper meals became a luxury. I was surviving mostly on leftover pastries from the coffee shop and whatever cheap snacks I could afford. I was already thin, but I started losing weight, and my clothes began to hang loosely on me. Sleep brought little relief, as it was often filled with anxious dreams of being evicted with nowhere to go. A sense of hopelessness began to creep into my daily life. I started to question if it was worth fighting so hard just to make ends meet. All my academic achievements seemed distant and meaningless in the face of the daily struggle for simple survival. My friendships with Chloe and Jordan also began to suffer. At first, I told them a simplified version of what had happened, omitting the worst details so as not to worry them. But as the weeks went by, I started ignoring their messages. The gap between their normal summer vacations and my difficult reality seemed too wide to bridge. They kept trying to reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the whole situation without completely breaking down. In mid-July, I enrolled in a summer course at Crestwood, hoping to keep up with my studies. The attempt was a disaster. I couldn't concentrate on the lectures, and after failing a midterm exam, my perfect GPA was in jeopardy. My professor, concerned by the drastic change from the previous semester, tactfully suggested I drop the course to avoid the risk of academic probation. The situation worsened when I received an email from the scholarship committee requesting a meeting to discuss my academic performance. Without a minimum GPA, my full scholarship, the only thing allowing me to attend college, was at risk. The future I had worked so hard to build was falling apart, and I had no safety net. One evening at the library, while shelving books, I caught a glimpse of a woman who looked strikingly like my mother. The mere sight of her was enough to make my heart race and my breathing become difficult. I had a panic attack right there in the aisle, in front of patrons and my colleagues. My manager sent me home early with a stern warning not to bring my personal troubles to work. That night, curled up on the lumpy mattress in my tiny, stuffy room, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of my situation. My parents hadn't just left me homeless, they had systematically removed every part of my support system, including the mementos that connected me to my grandfather's memory. The feeling of being completely rejected felt final and irrevocable. For the first time, I was truly worried about my future. Not about my physical safety, but about losing the person I used to be. The ambitious, driven, and confident student was disappearing under the simple daily pressure of struggling to survive. I knew that if something didn't change soon, there might be nothing left of that person. August brought oppressive heat and growing financial pressure. The fall semester was just a few weeks away, and my scholarship was still in limbo. The university's financial aid office began sending insistent letters about unpaid bills that my scholarship didn't cover. Each new notice was another unpleasant jolt. I started relying on a credit card for basic necessities, and the debt quickly mounted. The high interest rates made it nearly impossible to pay it off. Every minimum payment I managed to make barely dented the total amount. The financial strain became a constant weight on my shoulders. My housing situation became even more precarious when Rachel announced she was moving in with her boyfriend, leaving me responsible for the entire rent. My hastily posted ads for a roommate went unanswered. The landlord showed no sympathy and gave me an ultimatum: 10 days to pay the full amount or move out. Feeling cornered, I decided to make one last attempt to contact my parents. After weeks of silence, I unblocked their numbers and called my father first, hoping he would be more understanding than my mother. "Sadie," he said in a flat, businesslike tone. I assume this call is about money. Dad, I'm on the verge of losing my scholarship and my housing. I don't have the strength to work anymore. I just need some help. Admitting it was incredibly difficult, but I had no other options. Your mother and I have already made our decision. This is a necessary life lesson. No one gets a free ride, you have to earn your place. His words sounded like quotes from a book, completely detached from my reality. A life lesson? I asked, my composure beginning to crack. I'm working 3 jobs to survive because you left me on the street without a word. That's the problem, he replied. You've always felt entitled. We supported you for 18 years. Other students manage on their own. You didn't just stop supporting me. You deliberately destroyed everything. You took my things, took a family heirloom you had no right to touch. That journal is a family possession, not just yours, he cut in coldly. Your grandfather would have wanted us to have it. As for a warning, maybe if you'd called home more often instead of living your new life, you would have known about our plans. I fell silent for a moment, trying to process the absurdity of his words. They had intentionally hidden all information about the house sale, but somehow, in their minds, I was the one to blame. You're just ungrateful, Sadie, I heard in response. After everything we've done for you, you're playing the victim when all we want is for you to grow up. At that moment, the last shred of my hope for their understanding vanished. I realized they would never see the situation through my eyes. Suddenly, I felt a calm settle within me. My voice was even and clear when I replied, this is our last conversation. You've taught me the most important lesson, that family can't be relied upon and that love always comes with conditions. Thank you for that lesson. There won't be any others. I hit the end call button. There were no tears, no regrets. I just opened my contacts and blocked their numbers again. It wasn't an impulsive act, but a conscious one. Painful, but the only right step to start moving forward. The next morning, the landlord handed me a 48-hour eviction notice. With nowhere to go, I packed what little I had left into a single backpack. The remaining textbooks in my damaged portfolio were too heavy, so I had to leave them behind. That night, a storm passed through our area. I found shelter under an awning at the entrance to the public library, but I still got soaked. By morning, my clothes were still damp, and I had a fever. I tried to walk to my morning shift at the coffee shop but only made it a couple of blocks before feeling too weak to go on. A passerby noticed my condition and called an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed me with pneumonia and severe dehydration. They became concerned when I told them I had no permanent address and no family to contact. The doctor explained that my body was under extreme stress and that I needed to be hospitalized for treatment. I told him I couldn't afford it at all, not even the emergency room visit itself. A hospital social worker was called in. I explained my situation, how I had lost my housing, how my scholarship was in jeopardy, and that I was too sick to work. She listened carefully and noted my student status. She suggested that the university might have resources for students in similar situations and asked for permission to call them. Given the circumstances, I agreed. When I woke up, the first person I saw was my professor, Evelyn Reed, sitting in a chair next to my hospital bed. It felt so surreal that for a second, I thought I was dreaming. Welcome back, she said quietly. You've been asleep for almost a day. I was confused. Professor Reed, how did you know I was here? She explained that the hospital had contacted the Student Affairs office, and they, in turn, had reached out to her because of my major. Her gaze was full of concern. She asked why I hadn't sought help sooner. I quietly confessed that I was too proud and ashamed to tell anyone what was happening. I thought I could handle it on my own, I whispered. Dr. Reed gently shook her head. No one should have to handle a situation like this alone, especially at 21. What you've been through isn't independence, it's isolation. Then she told me about a possible solution. The architecture department had an urgent opening for a research assistant. It wasn't the most prestigious job, but it came with a small stipend and, most importantly, access to graduate student housing for the rest of the summer. It's a single room, she explained. Simple, but clean and safe. The stipend will be small, but combined with the university meal plan, you won't have to worry about food. I felt tears welling up, overwhelmed by the unexpected help. Why are you doing all this for me? I asked. Because you're a talented student in an unjust situation, she said simply. But more importantly, because this is what a community does. It supports its own in times of need. The idea that a community could be a support system was completely new to me. Things really started to change thanks to Reed's intervention. She not only introduced me to the head of the university's counseling center, Professor Helen Albright, but also activated a whole support system on campus. The architecture department used an emergency fund to cover my medical bills, and the financial aid office revised the terms of my scholarship, giving me a chance to fix things in the next semester. After being discharged from the hospital, I moved into a simple but safe room in the graduate dorm. The first few days, I just recovered. I slept and, for the first time in a long time, ate proper meals in the dining hall. At the same time, I started regular sessions with Professor Albright, which helped me manage my anxiety and establish a new routine. It was during these conversations that I began to understand my parents' motives. When I asked why they did it, Professor Albright's answer was short: control. She suggested that by putting me in an impossible situation, they expected me to come back, but on their terms. Professor Albright's thought about control made a lot of things fall into place. I realized my parents' actions weren't aimed at making me independent, but at increasing my dependence on them. Against this backdrop, my new job as a research assistant became a real lifesaver. The tasks were simple, mostly archiving and digitizing blueprints, but they brought me back into the world of architecture. More importantly, the graduate students and faculty treated me like a colleague whose opinion was valued. It was a completely new feeling for me. When I felt physically better, I finally mustered the courage to reply to the numerous messages from Chloe and Jordan. We had a video call, and without holding anything back, I told them everything that had happened. Their reaction was immediate and practical. "I'm changing my ticket and flying in next week," Chloe decided on the spot. "And I'll help you move into the dorm as soon as it opens," Jordan added, allowing no objections. Their support was offered without a hint of pity or judgment. It was a simple, matter-of-fact display of friendship, and that's what began to change my perception of relationships. For the first time, I saw that help could be selfless and unburdened by hidden conditions. The university's support services proved to be another important resource for me. I was referred to a weekly group for students who had experienced family estrangement. Hearing other people's stories was difficult, but at the same time, it was empowering. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in my problem. In this group, I met Jessica, a nursing student who had been living without family support for several years. She became a sort of mentor to me. "The first year is the hardest," she told me once. "You miss the people who are still around, but over time, you create what I call a chosen family." This idea, to create a family of my own choosing, resonated deeply with me. As the fall semester approached, this concept became my guiding principle. My housing situation in the dorm stabilized, and my scholarship was temporarily reinstated, allowing me to finally think about the future, not just survival. Professor Reed helped me create a lighter course schedule for the fall so I could gradually rebuild my GPA without extra stress. Professor Reed's first assignment for the fall semester was a project to design a transitional housing center. She advised me to use my recent experience as a foundation, asking, "What could have made a difference for you this summer?" That question became the starting point for my work. I designed a modular settlement with shared resources and support services, which not only earned me one of the highest grades of my career but also reminded me why I fell in love with architecture in the first place. Thanks to a clear semester schedule, my life gradually returned to normal. I reconnected with my friends and was able to focus on my studies again. The intense anxiety began to subside, and simple joys returned to my life. I drew for pleasure, not just for assignments, and spent evenings watching movies with friends. My sessions with Albright were crucial during this time. She helped me understand that recovery is not a straight path and that I could still have bad days. I began to realize that the sadness I sometimes felt wasn't for the family I had lost, but for the idealized image of a family I never had. Accepting this reality, as she explained, was a slow process made up of small steps, not one final decision. Dr. Albright explained that the main goal wasn't to forget or forgive. The most important thing was to reach a state where the past no longer dictates your present and future decisions. The point was to build a life where your worth is determined by your own actions, not by your relationship with your family. And that's the life I began to build, slowly, step by step. Every new independent decision, every healthy relationship, and every academic achievement became small bricks in this new foundation. A year and a half has passed since that summer, and my life has changed beyond recognition. Against all odds, I graduated from university with honors. Soon after, I got a job at Apex Design Collective, a firm that specialized in the very community projects I had dreamed of. I even rented my first real apartment, a spacious loft in a converted building downtown. One of my projects, a youth center, recently received an award from the City Planning Council. But the most important changes happened within. The independence that was once forced upon me as a punishment turned into a source of quiet strength. Every rent payment I made on my own, every work task I solved, and every holiday spent with my chosen family of friends bolstered my self-confidence. I had built a life that my biological parents could no longer influence in any way. My new loft, though small, finally became the sanctuary I had always dreamed of. A lot of light streamed through the huge windows, illuminating the walls I decorated with my own work and photographs. The pictures captured important moments of my new life: graduation with Chloe and Jordan, the opening of the youth center, hiking trips with friends. Each of these shots was a reminder of connections built on mutual respect, not on expectations and conditions. Financial independence came gradually. My starting salary was modest, but I learned to budget carefully to cover both necessities and small pleasures. I created the safety net for myself that I had been deprived of. I opened a savings account for emergencies, started contributing to a retirement fund, and got insurance. It took effort, but every such decision gave me a sense of control over my own life. A new relationship began where I least expected it, in a community garden where I volunteered. His name was Liam. He was an environmental engineer, and our first conversation was about how to integrate green spaces into urban development. This professional discussion soon turned into an invitation for coffee, and then into a full-fledged relationship based on mutual respect and honesty. On one of our first dates, he asked the inevitable question, "What about your family?" I calmly replied that I was not in contact with my relatives, mentally preparing for the standard questions and awkwardness. But Liam just nodded. "Family are the people who are there for you, not just blood relatives," he said. "I'd be happy to hear your story whenever you're ready to tell it." His reaction showed me his maturity. And later, when I finally shared the whole story with him, he listened without judgment and never tried to convince me to reconcile, respecting my decision. My career growth directly reflected on my financial stability. When I was promoted to junior project manager, I received a significant pay raise. This allowed me to finally tackle the debts that had accumulated during that difficult summer. With each credit card I paid off, I felt myself shedding the shackles of the past. By the 2-year anniversary of the day I found my things on the street, I was not only debt-free but also had savings and clear career prospects. I wouldn't have even remembered the date if Liam hadn't casually mentioned it over dinner. "It's been exactly 2 years today, right?" he asked. I was surprised he remembered. "It's an important day for you," he said simply, taking my hand. "And I'm so proud of you. Not everyone could have gone through that and built everything from scratch." His words caught me off guard and brought a wave of emotions. I had been so focused on moving forward that I rarely looked back. But he was right. Just 2 years ago, I was in the hospital, homeless and hopeless. And now I was standing firmly on my own 2 feet, in a life I had created entirely for myself. The morning of that day started like any other in my new, settled life, until I happened to look at the archived notifications on my phone. There was a strange entry, 260 call attempts from my mother's blocked number over the past 2 years. I had never received the alerts, they just silently accumulated. For the first time in a long while, I decided to check my voicemail, not knowing what to expect. Listening to the messages was like studying someone else's history. The early recordings were full of cold, demanding tones. But over time, her tone changed, becoming more and more strained until it reached the last recording, left a few days ago. There was nothing of my former mother in that message. Her voice was broken and scared as she said that my father had a heart condition and that they needed my help. I didn't believe it at first, but a quick internet search dispelled all doubts. I found an article on a local Arizona news website. It was about a fundraiser for the Vance family, who were facing huge medical bills and the risk of losing their home after my father suffered a major heart attack. Coincidentally, my Aunt Laura called me that same day. She started the conversation very cautiously, acknowledging my right to feel however I felt, but said that I should know the whole picture. Then she described in detail how my parents' lives had changed. Their major real estate investment in Arizona had turned into a complete failure due to a market downturn. They had been losing money long before my father, Arthur, started having health problems. My mother, Eleanor, had tried to go back to work, but with their savings depleted and medical bills mounting, they found themselves in a very difficult situation. I asked her directly what she expected from me. "I'm not asking you to help them with money," Laura clarified immediately. "After what they did, they don't deserve it." I just thought this context was important. She added that my mother seemed to regret what had happened, but admitted it was hard to tell if it was genuine or just a reaction to the current crisis. The news brought me no satisfaction. I felt no joy in their misfortune. Instead, I was just confused about what this new reality meant for me. There was a strange irony in it all. The 2 people who had abandoned me for financial gain were now being abandoned by the very system they had chosen over their own daughter. That evening, I discussed the news with Liam, Chloe, and Jordan. Their opinions were unanimous. It was my decision and mine alone, and there was no right or wrong answer based on a sense of duty. Chloe asked a practical question: will helping them bring you peace of mind, or will it disrupt it? Jordan was more blunt, pointing out that they were essentially strangers who had caused me a lot of trouble in the past. Professor Albright gave the clearest perspective during our next session. She advised me to think about what I needed from this contact, not what they needed. Closure? Acknowledgement from them? Or nothing at all? "Any of your needs are valid," she said. After a few days of reflection, I realized I did want something. Not reconciliation, but a chance for closure. I wanted to talk to them directly, but not as the desperate girl from our last conversation, but as the accomplished adult I had become. With this clarity, I made a decision that defined my next step. It was based solely on my own needs, not on their expectations or conventional notions of family duty. I decided to fly to Arizona for a short, 48-hour visit. The Phoenix airport was full of vacationers, a stark contrast to the serious purpose of my trip. After renting a car, I drove to a nondescript medical rehabilitation center on the outskirts of the city. Here, I was about to meet my parents for the first time in 2 years. I found my mother, Eleanor, in the waiting room. The change in her was striking. Instead of the confident and perfectly put-together woman I remembered, I saw someone who looked much older than her years. She was tired, with unkempt hair and clothes that were now too big for her. I watched her for a moment before she noticed me. I approached and said her name, keeping my tone formal, Eleanor. She looked up sharply, her eyes widening in surprise. "Sadie, you came," she said, trying to stand up to hug me. I didn't move, and after an awkward pause, she sank back into her chair. I immediately stated the reason for my visit, maintaining a neutral tone. "I'm here to see Arthur and to have one conversation with both of you." My mother seemed to understand the boundaries I had set. She said he was in therapy at the moment and pointed to a chair next to her. I sat opposite, creating a physical distance that mirrored our emotional one. When I mentioned that I knew about Arthur's serious health crisis, she began to talk about the consequences. Complications from the attack had affected his speech and mobility. As she spoke, she nervously twisted her wedding ring, then moved on to their financial problems. The medical bills, she said, were enormous, and they were on the verge of losing their home. I listened to her without reacting to the hidden plea for help. Instead, I asked how long he had been there. 4 weeks, she answered, her voice trembling. He's being discharged next week because we can't afford it anymore. She looked at me, and her composure seemed to crack. Sadie, I know we have no right to ask you for anything, but just you being here means more than you can imagine. I immediately shut down her hopes. I didn't come for a reconciliation, I said clearly. I'm here to say everything directly, not through messages. I needed you to see who I've become, not because of you, but in spite of you. At that moment, a nurse brought my father in. The change was stark. Instead of the strong, authoritative man I remembered, I saw a weakened version of his former self. His heart condition had left visible effects. When his eyes met mine, he struggled to say my name, and tears welled up in his eyes. Seeing him like this was not easy. It didn't erase the past, but it did evoke some sympathy for him as a person, separate from his actions. "Hello, Arthur," I said. When the nurse left, a heavy silence fell. My mother suggested we find a more private place, but I refused. "This is fine," I replied, preferring to stay on neutral ground. "This won't take long." I squared my shoulders, gathering the strength I had been building for the past 2 years. I began to speak, clearly stating my position to avoid any misunderstanding. "I didn't come out of a sense of duty or to forgive," I said. "I'm here for myself, to close this chapter properly and move on." My father tried to say something, but I continued. 2 years ago, you chose to abandon me without warning. You got rid of my belongings, including precious family heirlooms, and left me without a roof over my head. You created a crisis for me and then blamed me for it. Your actions nearly cost me my scholarship and severely damaged my health, I added calmly. My mother's expression changed. "We didn't mean for things to go that far," she said. "You were always so capable, we just thought you would handle it." "I was 21, I replied in an even tone. "And handling it shouldn't have meant ending up on the street." At that moment, my father, struggling for words, finally managed to say, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sadie." It was probably the first apology I had ever heard from him. For a moment, it caught me off guard, but I knew I couldn't let it derail me. "That wasn't why I had come. I want you to know that I've built my life without you," I continued. "I graduated with honors, I have a good job in architecture, and I'm financially stable. I have real, healthy relationships. I created all of this myself." My mother tried to save face. "We always knew you were capable of great things." "It's not about capability, it's about basic decency," I replied, remaining calm. "Your current struggles don't erase your past actions. And I'm not here to save you." I saw the disappointment on my father's face, so I made my position clear. However, I am willing to help you navigate the available assistance programs. Not with my money, but with information. The relief on my mother's face turned to embarrassment when I added my conditions. I will not provide financial support, and I will not pretend we are a normal family again. I will simply provide information. My mother quietly agreed that this was more than fair. I took a folder out of my bag and placed it on the table. Here's everything you need: information on medical debt relief programs, housing assistance options, and the contact information for a social worker who is already expecting your call. My father reached for the folder with his good hand and clutched it tightly. Thank you. I wanted them to understand the main point. This gesture doesn't fix the past or restore trust, I said. I'm doing this because I'm strong enough that it won't harm me, not because you deserve help. My mother nodded through her tears. We ruined everything. I see that now. Yes, I agreed. Some things can't be fixed, and our relationship is one of them. I'm not here for revenge, but to establish the truth upon which any future communication, if any, will be built. We spent the next hour defining these new rules. No financial requests, no sharing of personal information, communication primarily via email, no holiday visits, and no pretending we were a normal family. As I was about to leave, my father caught my attention. With noticeable effort, he uttered his clearest sentence of the entire meeting: "Proud of you. Not for the help, but for surviving us." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. He acknowledged that their upbringing had been an obstacle I had to overcome. I just gave a single nod in return, accepting his words but not softening my boundaries. I'll email next week about the paperwork. That's all for now. And with those words, I left. On the way back to the hotel, I expected to feel a storm of emotions, but instead, I felt a surprising calm. I had done what I needed to do, faced my past head-on, and come out of the situation whole. I realized their power over me was gone, not because I had forgiven them, but because I had grown up and learned to set boundaries. When I got home, I told Liam, Chloe, and Jordan everything. When Chloe asked if I regretted the trip, I answered with confidence that I did not. This visit proved to me what I've wanted to understand for a long time, I explained. Their opinion of me no longer matters. I don't need their approval. Liam smiled and squeezed my hand. That's real independence, he said. In the following months, I strictly adhered to the established rules. My parents were able to get help thanks to the information I provided. Our communication remained infrequent, conducted via email, and focused only on practical matters. It was neither a reconciliation nor a complete break. It was a new, carefully constructed balance that allowed me to live my life while protecting my peace of mind. This whole experience taught me the most important thing: family is defined by actions, not DNA. My real family became the people who supported me during my toughest times without any conditions. People like Professor Reed, my neighbor Mrs. Henderson, my friends Chloe and Jordan, and my partner Liam. They earned that title with their respect and care. This new understanding of community directly influenced my work. I focused on architecture that helps create such chosen families for others. For example, we expanded the youth center project to include housing for young people in difficult situations. My goal became to design spaces that provide a sense of belonging to those without traditional support. Over time, my attitude towards the past also changed. Painful memories still surface sometimes, but I no longer let them control me. That girl left by the soggy boxes is a part of my story, but she is no longer all of me. Her experience does not define my present. Looking back, I realized that those boxes on the driveway contained not only books and some belongings. They also held an unintentional gift: the push to build a life based on genuine connection, not on a sense of duty. In the end, the home I built within myself turned out to be far more reliable than any building my parents could have given or taken away. And what do you think? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to start over from scratch? And what does family mean to you, DNA or actions? I would be very interested to read your stories in the comments. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share new stories about how people find the strength to move on.